Dark X-Men, which is a very recent title that's coming out of the fall of Krakoa. So Dark X-Men is by Steve Fox, Jonas Scharf. Steve Fox is the writer. Jonas Scharf is the artist. Colors by Frank Martin. Letters by Clayton Cowles. 5-issue series that ended in December. This was on my short list for best new series of 2023. Per League of Comic Geeks, the trade is set to come out in July. I think with everything going on with Krakoa, all things X-Men, it's kind of hard to expect them to do more with these characters beyond these 5 issues. There was definitely room to run it back if they wanted to. That doesn't mean there's not stakes in this series, but it was like they have room to do more here. And quite frankly, I would love to see them do it. Steve Fox is somebody that I'm fairly new to. I can't think of anything that he's written. I didn't look into it afterwards, but Jonas Scharf is someone who I am familiar with. We talked about Basilisk a while back on this show. I did an episode on that, and he was the artist on that series. And I'll talk about his approach with these two titles a little bit later on. But the synopsis for Dark X-Men: the Goblin Queen assembles her own team of Dark X-Men. Hope the world survives the experience. Following the explosive events of the Hellfire Gala, Madeline Pryor realizes the world needs the X-Men now more than ever. Havoc and Gambit have served on the team before, but never one that looks like this. And how does young mutant Carmen Cruz, aka Gimmick, fall under the Goblin Queen's sway? Find out in the most horrific installment of the X-Men saga yet. And this is pretty violent. I don't think I'd put it on
Sabretooth and Wolverine.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't put it on that level. But I would say from like what we've seen in recent years so far, obviously Sabretooth and Wolverine, it's just even those first 2 issues, there's been nothing to that level. Then we get Ghost Rider, and everything with Ghost Rider has been on that has been on a level. And I know Wolverine's right there, like all pre-Sabretooth War, it's had its moments for sure too. I would say after those 3 titles, like Dark X-Men, for recent stuff, is like in terms of like the violence of the action that we see, because obviously like with X-Men stuff we've seen some crazy, like the most recent Hellfire Gala is absolutely batshit, but in the things that happen are very serious, but at the same time like the action, like we're talking about something different here and what we see in the art. Now, we mentioned some of the main players here already. We got Madeline Pryor, who is Jean Grey's clone. She's out to save mutantdom in a way that feels very similar to the old X-Men. But you could also say in some ways it's kind of like it does have like a Brotherhood of Mutants kind of feel as well. Not that she's out to attack the humans, but she's like, I'm all about saving the mutants. That is all I care about. They are under fire right now. Nobody is here taking care of these people and these individuals. We need to go and make sure they're getting taken care of. Havoc is right alongside her as her lover. Now, we all know him as one of the Summers brothers, but he takes on, Madeline's lover in this series. And there's a lot that's going on with that character too. That gets a little spoilery if I say too much more when it comes to him. But I'm listing him second, but that's just because him and Madeline Pryor are an item. Then we get Gambit, who, for my money, I would say is probably the number 2 player on like the good guy side in this series, but he's still not like a primary character. This feels very much like it is a team book. It very much feels like that. Pryor is at the center of things, but it's still like we bounce around to a lot of characters. But I'll get more on Gambit in a second, but I also want to mention Azazel. To me, those are the 4 biggest characters without spoiling anything, and I'm even leaving some stuff out that comes at the end of the first issue just because I want to like leave that for the readers. I think that sets a really good tone to experience that the first time you read it, and I can talk about the series without getting into that. So there are other important players in here, but read the series to find out. You don't need to hear from me who they are. You'll find out as you go along. But what I love, like one of the big things for me when I read this is, okay, so this is like Dark X-Men. That sounds interesting. It sounds like these characters are very much operating outside the law, and they're possibly between, the old X-Men and the Brotherhood. All right, I'm interested in that. And then you have Gambit in the mix. Anytime Gambit is in the mix, I'm going to check it out. It is a guarantee. And there have been some recent stuff that maybe wasn't on the level that I wanted to be. And Gambit is a character who I can be quite snobby about. I try not to be with most characters, but honestly, I cannot help it because of how important he was for my comic book fandom. Steve Fox absolutely knows how to write Gambit, like 1,000%. Like I've said it before when I talked about it when the single issues were coming out. Like he does an outstanding job with that character. And then we get Azazel too, who we know, and obviously he's been very relevant recently because he was always known as Nightcrawler's father. And this is a little bit of a spoiler. It's not addressed here, but it's a spoiler for other stuff by a friend of the show, Si Spurrier, which we talked to him about maybe briefly. We didn't have a lot of time to talk Nightcrawler with him, but what time has made us realize that Azazel is actually not Nightcrawler's father. His parents are actually Mystique and Destiny. That is a conversation for another day. But Azazel's a character that, like, when that happens,
you are not the father.
Yes. When that development happens, like for me, it's like, okay, that's interesting. Separately, I'm reading Azazel in this series, and a character who don't know a ton outside of his, what we thought his importance to Nightcrawler, and then what we've seen very briefly on the big screen. But character looks cool. He has the same power as Nightcrawler. He seems kind of evil. Okay, so then we get him here, and I'm like, I like this guy. He's a real piece of shit. I'm really glad he's not Nightcrawler's father anymore because that guy's dealt with enough over the years. But God, like, Azazel is awful, but I also love him for that. He's such an interesting character to have in the mix. And between him and then Madeline Pryor and some of these other players that we have here, like, look, I love Madeline Pryor. I'll get to her more in a second too, but like, Gambit's the voice of reason here. Like, that just like that shouldn't happen. But at the same time, like, it was perfectly done. I was blown away.
Two things you're fucked. One, if Gambit is your voice of reason, and if you're the Boston Red Sox and you say someone like, I don't know, Jeff Fry is a starter on your team, right?
Yep.
You're fucked, right?
Yep, 100%. Yes, Jeff Fry. God, what a pull. But yeah, like, so again, like, at the same time, while he is the voice of reason for this team, it's the way it's done is perfect. And like, for me, that is a huge challenge from a writing standpoint. So like, Steve Fox is a guy who, like, we talked about it this week. He has it was Dead X-Men coming out. Like, I'm checking out that series, and I'm curious to see, like, if there's other stuff that he's done over the years that I just haven't been aware of, or I'm going to be checking out stuff, moving forward from him. Because if you can go and do that with this character in a less than ideal spot from a writing standpoint to, like, write Gambit at his best, like, I'm very, very much impressed by that. So he absolutely won me over. I'm going to be checking out more Steve Fox stuff down the line. And I also love what he did with Madeline Pryor too. Like, this is a character who I'm sure many X-Men readers are familiar with, if not know very well. Someone who I should definitely know a little better than I do, but I am familiar with her game. And we obviously all know she's been a problem in varying capacities before, but that also made it really interesting where it's like, okay, she's at the center of these things and she's trying to do good, and like, all right, well, what's going on here? And she's such a compelling character as the story goes along. And like, again, like, Steve Fox really sets a great tone with her from the jump, where she's like, I'm out to do good by the mutants, but like, I'm not out to do good, if that makes sense. Like, that like, she's very, like, you can feel her passion for the persecution that the mutants are undergoing, again, to like at the nth degree now because of everything that's gone on. And I just love how he developed her as a character to the point where, like, I'd love some more Madeline Pryor story. I'd love to see, just those three characters alone. I'd love to see more of them interacting with one another. And I'd love to see Steve Fox writing it. And I'd love to see Jonas Scharf drawing it too. And again, like, Jonas Scharf, a name who I haven't talked about much on this show, and I don't think you have either. But obviously, Basilisk is a series that I talked about on here at length, written by friend of the show, Cullen Bunn, over at Boom. Really enjoyed that series, TLDR book. and that was that series was great visually, and he did a few different things there. And when I saw his art for the when I saw the art for this book, I didn't realize that. I actually didn't look at the names because again, I was like, Gambit's in it. I'm checking it out, and then I looked after the fact, and when I saw that it was Jonas Scharf, I was like, oh, that's why this shit felt familiar because like there's like people talk about like Marvel house style, but then like the X-Men kind of have more of a style like that's like not the same across all books, but there's a very similar feel across X-Men books. And like this had that, but at the same time, it's like this is I know this artist. Like there's something familiar about it, and I can't quite tell what it is. And then when I saw it was Jonas Scharf, I was like, that makes sense, but also wow, because I would not have pegged that he was going to go and do an X-Men book because while he has like there you can again while I could tell like this is like I knew this guy from somewhere before, and then when I thought okay Basilisk, I see like that style in here still. He also modifies things in a way slightly too where it feels like this is an X-Men book like the this era of X-Men book. And I really like I loved what he did and how he adjusted, and I love that I still felt like that same the stuff that was in Basilisk that should translate to here. That's still his style. Like it's like he made adjustments, but he didn't compromise like what he is as an artist in the course of doing that, and that was awesome. And he had some great, outstanding action sequences, which I did mention before. And and there's some other Jonas Scharf stuff out there. There's actually another title that he did at Boom with Cullen that neither of us have talked about that I intend to check out. If you do the work to find it and look at it first before me, fair game. But at the same time, I do intend to check it out. But I, in general, so like I'm all in on checking out more Steve Fox stuff. And when it comes to Scharf too, I do want to check more out. But I also like I would love to see from him. I would love to see him get more opportunities because he can do horror. See him get opportunities where it's like an action story, but it incorporates a lot of horror elements within it because he does such a good job with action. And Basilisk kind of puts him in a similar spot there too. But I would like what he has here with the X-Men and what he did with this opportunity. I thought was outstanding. I'm sure he'll get more work from Marvel, if not DC. I'm sure would want to. But like I would love to see him like some indie get back into some more indie work too. But either way, like I'm going to be checking out Jonas Scharf stuff as the more I see his name pop up. But really had a lot of fun with Dark X-Men.